Hmm. Yeah. What? what? The landscape that we're moving into after awakening. Um, why does it become so hard to talk about? um, I think one of the reasons is we're moving from the landscape of thought into the landscape of experience. And while that may not seem very strange, very difficult, right? We have a language for experience, don't we? um, we do. We have a language for experience that works pretty well to describe experience that's outside of us. We don't have a great language for experience that takes place inside. We don't have a language for thinking and thought that doesn't take place on the level of ideas. We can refer to insights, and insights tend to be kind of seen as moments. But what about thinking that's not in thoughts? It's possible to experience it. Um, but hard to describe. We have languages for feeling, for emotional states, and yet um, emotional states are kind of similar to insights, right? We experience an emotion. It moves through our system, our body. But what about the much more subtle state of being. There's feelings. There's not really feelings. There's feeling on a subtle level that the language of emotion just doesn't really describe very well. Much more like currents, subtle currents. And we can learn to move in these really subtle spaces. Spaces, we could say, of feeling, spaces of thinking. But they're just not feeling and thinking as we're used to them. Thought starts to move into just kind of a sense of curiosity. And it's a curiosity that doesn't actually need or want or feel very concerned with getting an answer. We are. We're just curious. It's a fundamental part of our character, the character of the natural state. Learning to feel and flow and examine and move in these subtle internal currents. The language of feeling starts to break down because we're moving always into the experiential. Moving away from the descriptive, the thing that's trying to make sense of it all. The thing that really, really thinks if it just understands what's happening, everything will be all right. And one way to describe this, right, would be thinking without an I, feeling without a me. And, that that's fine. Um, Tends to sort of turn a little conceptual for me. And as we realize more and more, right, like there's only one one direction here, right? And that direction points into experience. And while we can think about and conceptualize experience, it doesn't really help us that much. Much more useful to experience. So we're experiencing, we're learning on an experiential level. And it's really, it's really the most fundamental and primary way that we learn as human beings, right? Sure, we can learn facts, we can learn concepts, and they have their uses and applications. But what we're really, really interested in is ourselves. And how we're going to learn is experientially. And how, at first, it can be really difficult, seemingly, to move from the language of thought, the habit of thought, the habit of feeling, into these more subtle realms. It's just not what we're used to. And so one of the sort of primary tools that I apply here and I use here is let's say I have an insight. I have we could call it a more conceptual learning. I've learned something. Um, and, it's packaged in words. I can extend that insight and that experience from the mental sort of level of being, and allow myself to feel it in a deeper, more profound way, in an experiential way, by breathing that insight, that experience, that aha moment into the rest of my system. What does that mean, breathing it into my system? So, let's say I have this realization: I am love. That's that's sort of one layer, right? That's a layer of an idea composed in language. It's pointing towards some truth. It has some value, right? And it's not, certainly not complete. It's just a pointer, just a finger pointing at the moon. Nevertheless, I can breathe into that realization. I am love. And I can start to sense and feel the deeper truth that those words, which are just symbols, point to. And I can breathe that realization through all the subtle layers of being. I can breathe let it really permeate the subtle body, the energy body, also just words. The physical body, the gross body, so this is how a conceptual, intellectual, sort of, mental insight. We can turn that insight into a real experiential learning for ourselves, for our system. And there's value in this, right? Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty thick. And it's usually not enough for me to just learn a lesson and be done with it forever. Once in a while, that might happen. But there's just so many lessons. And to really integrate them, right? Like I could learn that same lesson 100 times over, 1,000 times over in different ways. Or I could really breathe it in and spend some time with it when it arises. And maybe only have to learn it 10 times. I mean, that is, the journey after awakening in a nutshell. Is we're on the journey. The only real question is, how long is it going to take? It's some of it's going to come down to our stubbornness, our resistance, our clinging to old things. Our pride. I'm awake enough. I'm awake. I don't need to learn anything new. I know the truth. And some of it's going to come down to techniques. There are techniques. We can learn techniques like this. And they will save time. Yeah, yeah. It's um, it's a funny thing, right? Moving beyond thought. Um, and still thinking, still using our mental capacities. Um, there's a layer, a level of thought where words are not, they're no longer passing through our minds, but our minds, our big mind, understands almost instantly what is conveyed. Which is why I'm always laughing. Because because it's so ridiculous. um, to think without thinking, to understand without a me. You know, this is why why spiritual teachers are always talking in the most ridiculous way. Um, oh yeah, there's understanding. Um, Understanding just arises, and laughter just arises, and it's true. And and also, I got no issue saying these things are happening to me and within me, right? um, I think you know, there's some value in pointing, to no self, but it it just gets so silly with language. And so that's why I like to use the language that we already know. And it doesn't really matter that much, right? I mean, the me is going to be there to a greater or lesser extent until it's not. And then, after that, who knows? Maybe it'll come back. But when we're learning on an experiential level, we're learning in spite of the me, whether or not the me is there. We're still learning. What's really important in us is learning. So try it out next time you have an insight. See if you can start to feel the true nature of that insight, what it's pointing to beyond sort of the conceptual level. See if you can feel the subtle energy present in that insight. See if you can let that insight really permeate your whole being. Let that insight teach your whole system something. It's why it arose. It has value for you, whatever it is. If it stays on the mental, conceptual level, you'll probably be learning it again. Or something very similar to it. See what it's like to think. It's much more like feeling, a thinking that is feeling. See if you can feel, experience feeling. Even when there's not a big, noticeable feeling coming through. What about when it's subtle, peaceful?